we have some callers, and we'll get to them in a moment. Thank you for hanging in there. 773-763-9278 is our number. There's a lot in this budget to scare the crap out of Republicans. I mean, shake in your boots. This is terrible in this budget that would scare Republicans. Not because it creates communism, it undermines the military, it destroys the family structure, it, turns every child transgender, whether they want to or not, against their will.
It's going to be because it will show that government works.
Yep. One of the here's just one. There's a $32 million for a new a renewed and expanded initiative called and I feel like this is aimed at Republicans because it's like something you could put on the side of a dirt bike. Strike Force. Strike Force is what's Strike Force to? Is it to militarize the police? Is it to give attack helicopters like Blue Thunder to small town sheriff's departments? No. Strike Force is to help people, and this is I'm reading directly from the budget, is to help people in high poverty rural communities tap into federal resources. Now, is that $32 million in federal resources for rural communities? No. It's $32 million just for financial counselors and credit advisors and small business administration people to go into rural communities and go, hey, your farm is operating a little rough. You qualify for this program that will offset some of your taxes and some of your debt. The Farm Bill gave you some money and it's sitting there. You don't know you don't know the government is working because they want you to think it's not. Your representative wants you to think your government hates you. And yet this money is sitting there that could help you and your family maintain your family farm, open your family store in the middle of, in Port Knuckle, Montana, and make sure it's the cutest little convenience store and Bible front group in the entire country. That money is there for you. Those loans are available. And if you're worried about taking out a federally backed loan because you think there's some big thing, they'll help you find a private lender. And will guarantee the loan through the private lender through other programs. But you just don't know that's available to you because you live in the sticks and the Matt Gaetz of the world are lying to you so that they can hang out in your high school. So $32 million is put into this budget. Also provides an increased $65 million from the 2021 enacted level for rural e-connectivity program called Reconnect for rural broadband, which is where there's already broadband and it's just poorly installed or broken or whatever, just for repairs, just to go through and make it work. What was already sort of minor expansions. This is the creep of giant broadband that they're afraid of also because, how do you keep them down?
Which is a horrible mascot, by the way, the creep of giant broadband. Like they thought but
if you've been on,
they thought they could make it adorable, but Christ.
But you spent enough time on the internet, you know that's actually quite appropriate. It actually makes a lot of sense. Have you read?
And who are you now? The creep of giant broadband? Well,
yeah. Maybe. Have you read Joel Greenberg's Venmo messages? All right. So the budget also includes $318 million for regional commissions, which provide economic development assistance in distressed rural communities through infrastructure investments, workforce development, and other activities. Now, that $318 million, is that the money they're spending on those places? Is that just the money? Is that all they get? Is that all rural communities get is $318 million? No, that's $318 million in guidance and creation so that the federal funds, the billions of dollars for infrastructure projects, are targeted in places that have heretofore been, wait for it, underserved communities. I'm talking about Eastern Kentucky. I'm talking about the Tennessee Valley. I'm talking about Floribama and all the outlying horribly impoverished white areas where children get, dew mouth from sucking on a baby bottle full of Mountain Dew because they're, the family's
Which was the
making
original opening lyric to Jack and Diane, which they scrapped, thank goodness.
I think that's wise or whatever, because it would have narrowcast the song to a very
sucking on a chili dog outside the Tasty Freeze makes way more sense.
Better. Yeah. So as my teeth start to rot. All right, so their children's teeth rot inside their gums in eastern Kentucky and in Tennessee Valley from dew mouth.
And before they come through?
Let me tell you why this is that part alone, that one little piece of this thing, that $318 million, and that, I got news for you. That's gonna get through. That's getting through, no matter whatever version happens, the smaller $980 billion reconciliation version of it, no matter how squashed and small that is, you damn straight, that rural communities expenditure, that small guidance aspect where they come out, hey, I'm from the federal government and I'm here to help. Jesus Christ, no, I really am here. Do you know these programs are available to you and your family? You realize your kids could go to school for free because of your economic, you are in an economically depressed area. This whole area, everybody in this area could go to college for free. Everyone in eastern Kentucky, everyone, because of how much money they don't make a year, could end up sending their children to university if they qualify, of course, and of course they'll get 2 years of extra vocational and or community college. Perhaps they could go to Sayersville College, where there's a math wing named after my aunt. Which is in Kentucky. But that part of the bill.
Is it your anti-vaxxer?
Huh? No, my anti-vaxxer. No, my anti-vaxxer passed away. I mean, we're sorry to say. Yeah.
Of rickets.
Yeah, and measles at the same time. She got hit, couldn't shake it. I'm going to Steve from the Gold Coast is waiting for us online. I'm going to take this next break first, then we're going to talk to him on the other side of this, because I have a feeling he'll also add on to this part, and I don't want to cut him off before we get halfway into this.
Right on.
When you have to understand, kids, the scary part of this budget, the reason Republicans are afraid is because when they talk about underserved and marginalized communities, what the Republicans want everybody to believe is this is just poor black people. This is a welfare queen part of this whole thing. That's all this is going to. What they're really afraid of is that there are a lot more, because of the volume of humans in the country and who makes up that volume. There are more poor white trash in this country than there are black people in entirety. More white people with food insecurities, more uneducated people, more people with cancer clusters and birth defects in their communities, and crap schools and bad water and lead pipes and all that stuff. And if they fix that, that's what Mitch McConnell's afraid of. Because in a couple of cycles, it isn't going to be about Mexicans crossing the border and voting illegally that Republicans are afraid of. It's Eastern Kentucky and Tennessee Valley Republican, leaning or non-voting whites.
Things I'm already afraid of. I'm scared of those people.
That are going to show up, and bring us their own version of deliverance at the voting booth. That's not a good analogy. That's terrible.
No. I like the way you vote.
We'll be back right after this. Huddling. There's supposedly, if you listen to the right wingers, there's something you can't say. And it's that you can't want to help white people. You can't care about white people. Everything's an attack on white people. If you deal with the Tulsa race riots and the murders that happened there, it's an attack on white people. It's kind of an attack on the Ku Klux Klan and making sure it doesn't happen again, in my estimation, not necessarily on white people in general. And
white people,
because that's the whatever that dude's name is, who believes it should be. He's a white supremacist and he believes it should be pronounced white people, which is why Trump and his friends say Wharton. By the way, School of Business. Yep, it's not an accident. So. But I'm gonna say it and watch me get pilloried by progressives. The right wing will come to my defense. I have no doubt. The Biden budget helps a lot of impoverished white people, white people in underserved communities and in areas where they are effectively the financial minority, literally a class of people written off by the state power structure of a lot of red states as just the people we don't care about. The volume of those people, the mass of those people, the majority of those people are entrenched, generationally poor white people. And this budget helps those people. You know why?
Whatever, it's your funeral.
Wait, you know why? You know why it helps those people? Because they're people. And
I'm not tracking.
Right. And in helping those human beings who are left out of the ability to get loans, start businesses, and not have lead pipes, and not have coal leftovers in their chemicals in their drinking water that cause birth defects, or chemical plants dumping stuff into their water causing massive birth defects and cancer clusters in Louisiana, Mississippi, Floribama, all those areas. The vast majority, like I said, there are more poor white people in this country than there are black people at all. That means the Chris Rock bit about, the whole eating mayonnaise sandwiches, can't quote the rest of it. That's what he's talking about. This, by volume, this helps poor people. And the vast majority of poor people in this country, because the vast majority of people in this country are white. And this, and it applies equally. Underserved, marginalized, because man, if you don't think rednecks aren't marginalized, go into a mall when the people that live in the trailers walk in and see how the rest of the church folk go, those folks are marginalized. They're not marginalized because of their color. It's not as color form and cut and paste, but it is absolutely marginalized in that regard. And they are viewed as such by the government. And now, because of this budget, they will be helped. Let's take Steve from the Gold Coast, because I don't want to eat too much of the time. Yeah. And I know he always has a bunch to say. Welcome to the show, Steve. Are you there?
Yes, thank you for taking my call. And let me begin with saying I watched your piece on the Young Turks, and I thought it was great. I mean,
Thank you.
As progressives, as liberals, however you want to label us, it falls to us to critique some of our own. Yep. And quite frankly, that channel has become a caricature of itself. But, so I don't want to get off to
I appreciate you saying that. It's never easy when you deal with that kind of stuff, and you can get accused of the circular firing squad part of it. I think that only applies to policy, and I think what they've become and what they are talking about on there is nothing short of violence, and anybody who doesn't know what I'm talking about can go watch that video. And I think they're awful. That in a nutshell. And I've got a whole 20-minute explanation of why, not just like, But please go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more on that point. And you're absolutely right, I think, with regard to where the Republican Party is, because, they really are just the party of no. They have no vision for America other than we don't want this vision for America that Democrats are presenting. And the funny thing is, for people who are such purists about, the founders and so forth, I mean, the founding fathers always intended that this be. We actually have things like, constitutional conventions every so often, and rewrite, based upon our improvement, base of knowledge, rewrite our form of government, because that's what we do. Things don't stand still; it's not stagnant. And the problem that they have is that, just like with the Affordable Care Act, their biggest fear was, we give people this, they're going to like it. And that's exactly what happened, because 10 years on, nobody is talking about, really running against the Affordable Care Act. In 2018, a lot of people ran on it. And they knew full well, okay, there are things that you can still sort of challenge on the margins, but you're out of your mind if you want to stand before a stage of middle-class white Americans and say, oh, by the way, that provision that allows you to keep your 23-year-old on your health care coverage while they're in college, we want to throw that out. You're going to, Yeah, exactly. You're going to get a whole lot of dazed and confused looks because the people love that idea. So and that's exactly what you're talking about in terms of Republican attitudes. Yes, we invest in people. We invest in things like infrastructure, and infrastructure, the definition changes. We once had this thing called the rural electrification policy in America. So yes, in America during
which by the way, at the same time, again, affected the vast majority of people. It improved their lives were white people in rural communities, basically off the grid, farmers, people with windmills outside their house. Remember the old vision of the old farmhouse in Kansas with a windmill beside it? What the hell do you think that was for? It's because they weren't hooked up to the electrical grid. They had to use that to grind their mill. Like they didn't have access, and the government did it for them. Right.
Right, and information is the new commodity. So I'm particularly confused and perplexed in that if you look at what happened during COVID, it can represent a huge demographic shift because there are a lot of people who live in places like New York and Chicago, LA, and so forth, who quite frankly live there not because they so much want to, but because that's where their job is. Right. You just can't take my high tech job and maybe I want to live in Wyoming. I can't really do it from Wyoming. You have to go into the office there in Southern California. So, but given what we saw in COVID, now it's quite possible. You know what? You want to live in Nebraska or Wyoming and work for that company in Southern California, you might be able to do it. And you would think that Republicans would want this sort of thing because it means that, guess what? A lot of people would now move to a lot of states where it's lower cost of living, land is cheaper, and they could go ahead and work for that company in New York while living somewhere else. But no, like I said,
you do have. There's a small flaw in your plan there, Steve. In that the people that would be moving from these big cities and big states, are blue-leaning voters who are not, socially manipulated. Right. And that scares them a little bit, although those people have a lot of money, and that's I don't know. Right. That's where they're like, the tax dollars. And yet, right.
Yeah, no, and you're right, because that's that fear that you see online when you see these people talking about, all of these people are moving from California to Texas, but wait, we don't want them to turn Texas into California. So, that caveat they love to offer up, so. But I couldn't agree with you more in terms of, the fact that the Republican Party has no sense of identity. Because if you're not willing to help, people of color, fine, that's the Republican Party. But when you're in opposition to policies that help poor and middle class white people, who are you left with? So they know that they have to oppose this from the onset, because once it catches on, like so much else did, for the Affordable Care Act and so on. Where is there this hue and cry to get rid of Social Security or Medicare today? The people who are that demographic of voters, I love 20-somethings, but they don't vote. People who do vote, 50, 60, 70, that if you dare to suggest we need to get rid of Medicare, you'd be dead politically. So that this is their fear, that people are going to like these policies, and then therefore that they're just going to be entrenched in American public policy.
Again,
from here.
Even these policies, they also have to scare people about these policies that they are somehow, quote unquote, socialism or communism, when they are neither that. They are simply democrat. This is taxation with representation. Kings used to build roads. Kings used to have soldiers. Kings used to employ physicians for infectious disease. Kings used to have dudes in giant crow masks during plague times walking around trying to figure out how we round up the people that are sick and separate them from the people who aren't, so that we can keep trade happening at our ports without everybody dying. They created a healthcare system. The problem was it narrowly benefited a few, and the other people who were involved in it, who paid the taxes, didn't have any say in how their taxes were spent. It wasn't socialism when a king did it. It's not socialism now. It is democratic taxation.
You're absolutely right. And you're absolutely right. And the reason that they still retain the kind of power that they do, it's part of, there's an old axiom about, America. The problem with the American dream is that it makes everybody worry about the day that they're going to be rich. And that is very true. So you've got a ton of people who, when you do survey after survey, you ask them, okay, when do you think you'll become part of that top 10%? within, a decade or two.
Right.
The reality is that you have about a 1 in 100 chance of becoming, part of the 10% if you're in the bottom 25%. So,
oh, wow. 1 in 100 is generous.
I really believe that they're just a few years away from becoming,
And by the way, I know, agreed. And here's the other thing. A lot of people are end up in the upper 10% of of the American economic strata over the course of their life. A lot of people do. And the way they do it, though, is the sale of a house. Usually their primary biggest thing is temporarily they enter a tax level in their life that spikes higher than any other thing because it's a lifelong investment. They've been, they bought this house when it was a couple $100,000. I mean, look at Biden's house. They bought that house for $250,000 and they worked on it and he sold it for $1.2 million, right? That's what happens. And when you do that, when you bought a house in the 70s, you sat in the thing, and then you passed on that, when you're really old and you move into a home, and that's usually when that gets sold, that money goes to your kids, and that's the inheritance tax, that's the death tax they're always clamoring about. And that's about, you talk about the upper 1% or the upper 10%, that's the one time they're in that window. The rest of their life, they're mid to lower middle class all the time. And so that spike, that one thing, that one investment that could maybe bring that lower middle class family up into the upper middle class or expand their reach or their education base on this one thing. They had this house since the 70s, and then they get hit really hard by taxes on the one thing that they own of value in any major way. We got to take a break. They're in the upper 10% for that short period of time, and then they go right back down. But in their life, they were up in the upper 10%. And when they were in that upper 10%, the taxes were based on them being in the upper 10%, not, oh, this is an investment over time. That's why they let you roll it into another house. That's why they let you break it up.
So true.
Yeah.
And that's so true. And the problem is that in the meantime, their children weren't able to go to college because the same policy that allowed them to keep their house up paying so much in taxes, denied their children the opportunity to go to a university because there was no financial aid.
That's
so,
right.
It offsets the other by an exponential degree. So that's the problem.
That's why we don't fear complexity, and that's why we like callers like Steve from the Gold Coast. We had to take a break. I appreciate you calling in. We'll be back right after this. The budget is striking fear in the hearts of Republicans, not for what it will do to America, but what it will do for America. We'll be back.